Hello, Blue Jays fans, and welcome to episode 256 of the Jays from the Couch radio podcast, brought to you by, of course, jaysfromthecouch.com. We're so glad you're tuning in on this off day on April 19th. We record live on our Facebook page, our YouTube channel, and our Twitter account, streaming the podcast live where you can send in your questions or comments or insults, because this week it's on. We're going to talk about some Blue Jays blunders. We're going to talk about using people in the wrong roles. The last week of Blue Jays baseball has not been pretty, and I can't guarantee that this episode will be any different. If you're not streaming, we're watching the live stream. That's okay. You can always catch old episodes on our YouTube channel, but you can also catch the audio on Apple, Google, Spotify, Stitcher, anywhere you find a podcast, you'll find Jays from the Couch. Look us up there, give us a subscribe and a rate and review and all that fun stuff, and we would be forever in your debt. All right, I'm your host, as always, Sean Doyle. You can follow me on Twitter at Doyle JFtC. Like I said, we've got a great episode for you this week. It's maybe not so positive. We've got we have to have some real serious conversations here tonight, folks. So buckle up to help me see things perhaps more clearly. The Feckless Wonder, host of the On Feck Circle on Tuesdays at 6 p.m. Eastern Time. Steve Feck, how are you?
I'm just fine. Things are going just as I anticipated.
See, so. I knew it. I knew there was a little bit of smugness to the Feckless Wonder this evening. So I can't wait.
Well, we always have Karen to save us.
Exactly. So we might as well bring her in here before we ruin things right off the get-go. Host of the Sunny Side of the Dome, Thursdays at 6 p.m. Eastern Time on our YouTube channel. Karen, good evening.
Good evening, Sean. And good evening, Steve. And Steve, I don't know if you know, your sign says I toll.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay.
I told you so.
So we're going to get into what exactly Steve told us here in a bit. But Karen, you've got your work cut out for you this evening. I find myself, I woke up on the Feck side of the bed this morning, as it were. And that is not a confession of any kind. For all of our listeners and our viewers. That's just the proverbial Feck side of the bed, as it were. It's not been a good week of Blue Jays baseball. So, Karen, you are going to be the savior of this week's episode, and you're going to bring me off the ledge, because I have to tell you, I've got about both size 13s right on that edge. Because and I know, as people want to tell me, 16 games in, not a big deal. However, these are 16 games where the bulk of which they should have won, if in my opinion, right? And we'll look back at the last week where the Blue Jays beat the Yankees. Okay, good. We can celebrate that all day, every day. In fact, I'm starting to wish we could play the Yankees all day, every day. However, not so much. But after losing 2 of 3 games against the Angels, and then winning 2 of 3 against the Yankees, they go ahead and lose the series against the Kansas City Royals. Now, Steve, I know the first I told you so comes when you are going to remind us that you said the Kansas City Royals are not to be trifled with.
Absolutely. Again, it was a good matchup this early because the Blue Jays need to see how they match up against teams they're going to be competing for potential wild card spots. The Kansas City Royals had a sneaky good offseason. They already have a good young core, very similar looking in the mirror to the Blue Jays. But they've been doing timely hitting. I mean, their averages as a whole are probably worse than what the Blue Jays hitting averages might be, but they have done timely hitting throughout the season, and they are in first place in the American League Central.
Right. Just like the Boston Red Sox are in first place of the American League East. So,
which I also said you should look out for, and the Seattle Mariners, which I also said in effect you projectors need to look out for. So, hashtag I told you so.
Steve,
down.
make sure you grab the right piece of paper there, bud.
Oh, there you go.
Okay.
I'm always being censored, so that's why I only have the first couple letters.
True. All right. So, Karen, Steve predicted that the Kansas City Royals would be a force. I'm not sure I would go as far as saying that they're kind of looking in the mirror for the Toronto Blue Jays. I think the Blue Jays have a much bigger upside at this point, filling their holes with kind of B-level free agents and guys like Carlos Santana, who's on the downside of his career, extending Sal Perez, who I love, but again, how many more good years does he have left? So I don't know that I would say they're mirror images of each other. However, over the last series, Karen, the Royals, not only did they look better than I just painted them out to be, they look better than the Blue Jays. So, Karen, I guess my question to you is, are you as disheartened with losing the series against the Royals as I am?
Well, I mean, it is disappointing for sure. And first off, let me say that I hope Salvador Perez goes south and very, very soon, because he's killing the Jays. Yeah, and I mean, I can agree with Steve to a point in that the Blue Jays and Royals might be at similar places in terms of their competitive window, that they're kind of at the beginning of things. I wouldn't say that they're all that similar in terms of how they've constructed their team. I mean, the Royals are the Royals. The Royals seem to always be that team that they don't necessarily have a whole bunch of home run hitters. They've got speed. They'll get on base and they'll steal, and they'll run wild and steal 5 bases in one game. And that's something for the Jays to work on there. I mean, it's 7-9 this early on. It's unfortunate, it's disappointing, but again, 16 games with 146 to play, and how many very good teams, how many championship teams? I mean, look at the Nationals in 2019. What were they, 19-31 after 50 games? The Blue Jays in 2015 were 50-51 after 101. I mean, sometimes if a team is going to be really good and do some special things, it doesn't necessarily happen right out of the gate. I mean, we haven't seen George Springer yet. Hernandez has been out for a little while with the COVID. There's Nate Pearson, who we haven't seen yet, but who is apparently getting closer to coming back, and that should definitely help, assuming that he's going to be used as a starter, which is what it sounds like their plan is. So, yeah. I mean, they're trying to sort out this rotation. They've got Ryu, who is Ryu. They've got Matz, who has been out of this world. Like, thank you very much for trading for this starter with an ERA north of 9 and doing whatever they saw in him. And, I mean, Robbie Ray. He's wild but effective. And, I mean, they need a couple more good starters to fill out that rotation. So I think Pearson can help and see. Are you volunteering, Steve?
No, I think there was another I told you so coming.
No, I see this team continuing to get better. As I say, they've got some talent on the shelf. And I think Vlad is very much for real. And I'm excited to see them going forward and making the most of an opportunity. So,
yeah, and I'm not going to disagree that there are some positives. Vlad playing better than we've ever seen him play at the top of that list. Bo Bichette has been a bit of a bright spot. And, there are some performances, like, for example, Steve Matz. who nobody saw this coming, the just kind of complete turnaround from him. And if it wasn't for him, I would argue the Blue Jays would be in much worse shape, obviously. But they are dealing with injuries, so I get it. And yes, there's positives. But Karen, there are, at this point, and we only have 16 games to go on, right? I know that a season is long. It's a marathon. It's not a sprint. I get it. However, we only have 16 games to work with, and those 16 games have not been pretty, right? And yes, injuries play a large part in that. However, I'm going to suggest, and maybe this is where we'll start here, I'm going to suggest that a lot of the woes that we have seen has to do with personnel. It's a human resources issue, if you will. And I hate using that because, HR. But I think that using guys in roles that they shouldn't be in, right? When you've got maybe Charlie Montoyo, Steve, I know how you feel about that, but maybe he's in a role he shouldn't be in, but that's a story for a later episode. But poor decisions, in a 7-inning game, Steve Matz goes 6 innings and there's no reason to pull him out, and yet you do. Putting TJ Zoik into the game against the Royals when Tim Meza looked good. These are, kind of small decisions that end up with big results. So Karen, I guess my question is for you, as far as in-game decisions go, are we looking at perhaps some poor decisions?
I mean, I hesitate to say that I like Charlie Montoyo myself, and I find him to be a decent strategic manager. There are times when I wonder that there are times when he makes a decision that I'm not quite sure about. So, yeah, I mean, you don't. I felt it a lot more last year than I did so far this year, in that, if you've got 9 guys in your bullpen, you don't have to use all 9 of them in the same game. So sometimes it seems to me like maybe a relief pitcher can be left in a little longer rather than making so many switches all the time. So, yeah. And unfortunately, as much as I was all for TJ Zoik getting a chance, he really hasn't made the most of it. Unfortunately, so far here in MLB, I don't know if you guys caught my comment in our chats. I think it was yesterday, TJ Zoik has a higher earned run average than Tanner Roark. So, but Roark, Steve, I got to say, Roark's last couple of outings in relief have not been that bad.
Yeah, so he's still a Tanner Roark, but yes.
So, Steve, let's throw it to you then, as far as, and maybe Roark is a good place to start with regard to pitcher usage, right? Maybe he's found his groove or a role that suits him, or maybe he's just kind of turning things around. We saw Hyunjin Ryu last year get off to a poor start. That doesn't mean he's terrible. That doesn't mean, you know what I mean? So maybe Roark is starting to turn things around and could or would join the rotation.
I've said this a couple times the last couple of weeks. Tanner Roark has made his last start as a Blue Jay. I mean, if he can be effective, filling those innings coming out of the bullpen, that's building his trade value, which is good for the Jays and good for him. The Jays are gonna move forward with their core starters, and it looks like they have 4 of them now once Pearson comes back, and then just make it up as they go along, for the 5th starter spot. The problem that I had with pulling Matz, 7-game doubleheader, not a 9-inning game. So in theory, by having that 2 7-inning doubleheader, you're buying yourself 4 innings of relievers you don't have to use. And if you have Matz complete the game, which he could very well have done, you're adding another inning that you're saving your bullpen on. So that's not analytics. It's not weighted or have any pluses next to it. Nothing's created or anything, but it's just simple math. That would have been 5 innings that he would have bought for his bullpen so that he could have maybe used pitchers in better situations later in the series. I also, in Charlie's defense, I'm not sure that the pitching decisions are really being made by him. I think that's already laid out in the beginning of the game, saying these are the pitchers. This is what I want you to do with them. He may have some wiggle room, but I mean, his strategic in-game managing, I would say that's Charlie Montoya. But as far as the pitching staff, I'm pretty sure that's information being fed to him.
Right. And to further, I guess, defend him is, he can only, even if he's solely responsible for the decisions of that game, he can only work with what he has. Right. And I think, Steve, this points to something that you've mentioned all offseason, is that they haven't addressed their pitching needs, and they just got hit with pitcher after pitcher after pitcher getting hurt. So, it's the lack of depth, I guess, or the lack of addressing top tier-ish pitching is starting to show itself.
Well, there's depth as far as number of bodies. I will agree with that. The Blue Jays do have guys that are on the cusp. They're on the precipice, these younger arms. They're being asked, going to your earlier question, to pitch in roles that they are not accustomed to. That is potentially a problem. But just because you have a lot of bodies does not mean that you have a reliable pitching staff. And when you look at that Royals series, that's a big difference. The Royals went out and they filled the needs they had by signing Mike Minor, who I know got mocked around a little bit, but Mike Minor is a solid major league starter. They totally revamped their bullpen. They addressed their needs, as well as going out and getting bats, not only for their bench, but for their lineup. So, again, that's why I was saying it's the mirror image. But how the Royals did it, as Karen pointed out earlier too, is different than how the Blue Jays did it, but the Royals did it. And Ross Atkins and the Jays did not.
Right. Karen.
No, the comment that I was going to make, and you reminded me when we were talking about Steven Matz not finishing the 7-inning game. You guys have noticed, I'm sure, that we've got Ryu has gone into the 7th. He's actually finished pitching the 7th on at least one occasion, and Steven Matz, in one of his previous starts, he pitched into the 7th. I think he got one out. That's something that I don't believe we saw at all in 2020. And remember that it's still early in the season and starting pitchers are still getting stretched out. So to me, I know we kind of have a difference of opinion, because you guys were thinking that what we saw last year represented a permanent change in the philosophy of how to use starting pitchers, and that absolutely you just don't let them go deep into the game. Whereas for me, that always felt very 2020 specific into this bizarre, unprecedented set of circumstances. And I never thought it would continue. And to me, just seeing that this early on says to me that if a pitcher is doing well and his pitch count is reasonable, that there's a good chance he's going to be allowed to go a little deeper in the game. I mean, Robbie Ray, if he would stop walking the house already.
Yeah. I mean, it's not too often you see a guy walk 6 batters in a game and pitch a shutout.
I just have one question on that. Is it a change in philosophy, or did they have to change the philosophy temporarily because of the mounting number of injuries to key personnel in the bullpen? I mean, it's easier to let Ryu go 7 or Matz go 7 when you really don't have those stud arms in the bullpen. So I still believe that, okay, they made the adjustments, and that's great. And if Charlie stood up to the Atkins inning diet and said, this is what I want to do, even better. Though I think that's more a Pete Walker input as well. Don't sell Pete Walker short. But I don't know that those early season decisions were because it's a change in philosophy, or they're going back to the way you should use starting pitchers, or whether it's because of the injuries in the bullpen. They really haven't had much choice.
If I remember correctly, the games that I'm thinking of were pretty much before all of the bullpen injuries happened, with the exception of Yates, of course, because that was before the season even started. But other than that, the games that I'm thinking of, we're not talking 1 or 2 days ago. We're talking when Romano and Merriweather and like everybody pretty much was available, if I remember correctly. So we'll see how it goes as the season progresses. And
yeah. And I mean, and two, there's something to be said for your point, Karen, about, pitchers are still really getting kind of stretched out, right? There's a reason why mid-season form is an expression, right? Because that's when you should be firing on all cylinders. And right now, obviously, the Blue Jays are not in mid-season form. That's, but I guess one player who's kind of stands out and kind of personifies this whole issue with personnel usage is Cavan Biggio, right? And I wrote about that on Jays from the Couch today, just about how he seems to be the square peg that they're trying to fit into the round hole, right? So you see offensively and defensively, I mean, playing third base was something that he can do, but we're seeing already he's having early struggles at third base on a consistent day-to-day basis. Can he do it one-off? Sure. Does that mean that he has the versatility they need to just put him at third base and hope for the best? I'm not so sure. And then on the offensive side of things, you've got a guy who is an on-base machine, who has a very good eye at the plate and who has a good approach. And yet, so far this year, again, I know 16 games, but already to start the year, he looks like a completely different hitter. He's swinging outside of the zone at a rate far higher than he ever has. He's missing outside of the zone at a rate far higher than he ever has. He's missing on his swinging strike rate has jumped. He's just missing the ball. Now, that could be, again, kind of just a slump, right? Because he is one of the guys who kind of ebbs and flows, and I get that. I'm wondering, though, if there's a difference in approach because he's being asked to do something he's not normally. He's hit 5th and 6th. Like, that's not what he's used to. And so, and whether, a good hitter's a good hitter, a major league hitter should be able to hit anywhere, I don't buy that, because a Cavan Biggio gets on base. That's his job. When you are in the middle of the order in 5th and 6th, your job is different. And that's what I'm wondering about with Biggio. Are there too many changes? Is he being asked to do too many things that he just couldn't do? Or isn't used to doing, and is going to take a long time for him to get used to. So, Steve, I'm going to start with you for a response, to that, because I know eventually it'll lead you into talking about Marcus Semien. But just sticking with Biggio himself, what are your thoughts on this kind of observation that I'm throwing at you?
Well, I agree with you wholeheartedly. I have to admit, I'm taken a bit aback how much he struggled in the field, but approaching just the at-bats. When he was starting the season in the 2-hole, he was hitting behind a non-traditional leadoff hitter, who you just told me I couldn't mention. So his approach in that 2-hole behind a guy that's not going to be able to you really can't hit and run with him, who's not going to steal a base, where you're going to be more tempted to sit back. I think in that situation, I would think that Biggio would either himself or in conjunction with the coaching staff be more aggressive and try to do things maybe outside of his purview that he's done in the past. Now, I don't have a problem with Biggio hitting 6, because to me, that is setting up 2 leadoff hitters in your lineup. Springer for the first 5, and then Biggio for the bottom of your order. So I don't have a problem with that. But right, hitting 5th, that's different. And if you have a hitter that's struggling, I don't know that you bounce him around, the lineup as much. I mean, basically, then he's wondering, okay, so what am I? Okay, am I your 2-hitter? Am I your 6-hitter? Am I the 5-hitter? Do you want me to try to drive the ball more? I think there's a lot of mixed messages, and Biggio may be too smart for his own good, because he may be sort of like Vladdy did last year, I think, to a degree. Trying to do too much, trying to play outside of what his game really is because of what the team seems to be asking from him.
Yeah, and that's just it. We'll never know what they are actually asking him to do and expecting him to do. But when a hitter seems to be so different than what we're used to, that to me, somebody somewhere is trying to do something different, whether it's he's being told to or whether he himself has decided that. I don't know. But right now, Cavan Biggio is not the same hitter. And that's the offensive side of things, which you would hope would be consistent regardless of where he's playing on the field. But then, of course, all of the errors in third base. So, Karen, I'm going to throw it to you just to weigh in on Biggio here.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I'm a big fan of Cavan Biggio, and to be honest, this start that he has had to this season is kind of heartbreaking because he doesn't look like the same player at all in any aspect of his game whatsoever. I mean, it's unfortunately, he really has not been good at third base. And I mean, you look at Vlad Jr. last year playing first base, a position he'd never really played. And last year, he just wasn't a good defensive first baseman. And this year, while he's not perfect, he's light years better defensively than what we saw last year. So can Cavan Biggio improve his defense at third, assuming that they want him to play there for any length of time, be that this season or even beyond this season? Who the heck knows? I mean, I don't want to come out and say, no, he definitely can't improve. Right now, it doesn't look great or anything. I mean, you've got Santiago Espinal playing their one game, and you look at that and go, wow, look at the plays that he's making. And would Biggio have made that play? And I feel like, no, he wouldn't. But yeah, I mean, just everything that you said, he's probably, no matter what he does, Cavan Biggio will probably never be a guy that wins a batting title in Major League Baseball. But you look at what he has been prior to 2021. I mean, he's someone that he'll hit for some power some of the time. He'll hit some home runs. I mean, one of his biggest strengths is his patience, taking the walks. And while that's not completely gone from his game, because if you look at his on-base and his batting average, the on-base is still more than 100 points better than the batting average. So the trademark Biggio patience is still there to a point, but it's not what we're used to. I mean, in 2019, I was debating with people, well, Bichette and Biggio pretty much both have on-base percentages of 350, but they got there in different ways. Bichette never takes a walk, but he hits for high batting average. Biggio is the exact opposite. And it's just everything's different. I mean, even his ability to run the bases, when the Jays were a disaster on the bases in 2020, Cavan Biggio was the one guy that you could count on. I mean, he got thrown out at home plate the other day. He got caught stealing for the first time the other day. I mean, it was literally a you had one job scenario. He came in as a pinch runner for Rowdy Tellez. It's like, okay, if you can't run the bases, we can count on Cavan Biggio to run the bases. But even that, he went and got thrown out trying to steal. And I don't know what the answer is. I mean, I don't want to have a knee-jerk reaction and say send him to the minors, but how much longer are we going to watch him struggle before doing something? I don't know. And before Gurriel, Hernandez, they were both sent to AAA in 2019 when they both struggled mightily to start their seasons with the Toronto Blue Jays. And when they were brought back up, they both did so much better the second time around. So...
Mm-hmm. And I don't disagree that it has happened. I think my issue with the idea of, and sending Cavan Biggio down to AAA, once the the minor league season opens up. I think the issue I have with it is that I really believe none of this is his fault. I really believe that, sure, I mean, first of all, everybody goes through a rough patch. You know what I mean? It's a long season. We've already said that. It happens. Slumps happen. Defensive slumps happen less often, but they do happen. But I really believe none of this is his fault. I think it's because he's being asked to do things that he shouldn't be asked to do. His footwork at third base just doesn't look comfortable. Cavan Biggio, no matter if he's safe or out, has always looked comfortable. He does not look comfortable in the first 16 games of this season. And that's, to me, speaks to how he's being used. And I could be way off, which is fine. I've been off
I don't
before,
think that you are. and if I may interject just real quick.
Please do, yeah.
That would stop me. Cavan Biggio is what I have always called a heady player. He is the kind of player that you can go to and say, look, we're asking you to do things that you've never done before in your career, probably going back to Little League and Travel Ball. We want you to go to AAA. See if you can get into a rhythm as a third baseman. While you're doing that, let's see if you can find the Cavan Biggio that seems to be lost right now. Okay. Or if they're going to ask him to be a certain kind of hitter, work on this while you're in the minor leagues. And I'm not saying send him out for a long stretch of time. Just 2 weeks, 3 weeks. Put him in a position where if he does make a mistake or does struggle, it's not in a game that counts.
Right.
Put him in a position, and the guy that keeps popping in my head this last weekend was Ron Gant. Bobby Cox. Remember when we used to have good managers like Bobby Cox? Bobby Cox was the GM, and he went to Ron Gant. He was the second baseman, then they moved him to third because his bat was so promising. But then he was so bad at, in both situations. Cox said to him, say, look, we're going to send you down to AAA. You're going to play the outfield. You're not going to be a great outfielder right off the bat, but you're going to play the outfield. In fact, you're going to play center field. That's how much we believe in what you're doing, even though you might not be a long-term center fielder. Just do the best you can. Feel comfortable in that position. Work on your approach to the at-bats. And when he came up later in the 89 season, he was an entirely different ball player. You talk about like T.O. and Gurriel. He was a totally different ball player, and we know what he turned into. So I think it's not a punishment. The first reaction is like, oh, you're punishing him.
Yeah.
And we're asking you, it's not a punishment. You can go to Cavan Biggio. Right now, you couldn't go to Teoscar Hernandez and say, we're going to send you to AAA. We want you to work on that. He doesn't even want to DH, because now that he's kind of tasted that success. So I think Biggio would be able to take a demotion, knowing it's temporary, apply, his instincts and his acumen, and come back up. If not a better third baseman, at least he's going to be a more competent, relaxed hitter.
Right. Yeah. I think that the Marcus Semien deal, the signing, I think is the one thing that, at the time it was like, I don't see it, but okay, Biggio can play third. And now here we are seeing it play out in front of us. And I think more and more I'm leaning toward the FEC side of things with what was the point of that signing when it pushes Cavan Biggio to third base and the result is what we're seeing. And, this idea of Marcus Semien playing second base, well, he has some experience. I looked it up. Marcus Semien hasn't played second base since I think it was 2014, and it wasn't a lot. When was the last time Marcus Semien played third base? 2014. The exact same time has passed between when he played the each position, right? So it's not that he's more familiar with second or anything like that. I think it probably has something to do with him wanting to maintain that up the middle defense and whatever. In the Blue Jays, maybe, I think I threw this out to our behind the scenes chat that maybe they're in the back of the mind of the front office. There's let's keep his trade value up because we only have him for 1 year. You can't tell me they haven't thought about that. I mean, really? Like, this is Ross Atkins we're talking about here. You know what I mean? He's thought of at least for a minute about the potential of trading Marcus Semien at the trade deadline.
The potential, maybe we could, but I'm not gonna. Ross Atkins trading strategy.
Well,
yes,
sure.
But,
and speaking of, actually, I just saw John Morosi, never one to become irrelevant. He's desperate to stay relevant. Just mentioned how Chris Bryant is off to a hot start in Chicago, one of the only Cubs who is. That's probably what happens when you trade off anybody of value. But Chris Bryant, off to a good start, happens to play third base. Is it, the mind starts to wander a little bit, Karen. I mean, is there potentially some interest in stopping the bleeding at third base? And I think, and then that's no knock on Cavan Biggio, because I am as big a fan as you are of his. So, Karen, I guess maybe not, if it's not Chris Bryant now because his numbers are really good, his OPS is up over 1,000 and all of that stuff. Is the third base situation going to be solved before the season ends?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I'm not sure that their long-term solution at third base will be resolved this season. As I say, Cavan Biggio, please go out and prove me wrong, because right now, like you said, and you and I have both said it pretty much in unison, that he looks like a square peg in a round hole trying to play third base. So I don't see that. I mean, without any external additions, like I say, I like what Santiago Espinal does there. I don't know that they see him as an everyday player. I don't know that he will hit enough. He might. I mean, give the guy a chance. I think his bat has some promise, but whether he will, in the long run, hit well enough to be an everyday player, that remains to be seen. Some people think Jordan Groshans, with his throwing arm, is the ideal third baseman of the future, and he might be. Well, from what I saw in spring training, he is not MLB ready yet, so he needs some time, and I do not see that happening in 2021. So, yeah, it was interesting. I was looking at MLB stats today just because I'm so excited over Vlad Jr. and his OPS being like third or fourth best in all of MLB. And when I was looking at some of the other names, Mike Trout, JD Martinez, Chris Bryant, excuse me, like he's up there over 1,000. So I'm wondering how his defense is at third base. And I mean, he's on an expiring deal anyway. He's eligible for free agency after this season. So, with the Cubs, I heard that they were asking for the sun, the moon, and the stars just to get 1 year of what looked like a declining Chris Bryant. Might they be a little bit more reasonable, assuming that they're still willing to listen to trade offers for him? Because if his defense is even decent at third base, then that could be a short-term stopgap until such time as Jordan Groshans is ready to come up and take the job. Still don't know what you do with Cavan Biggio in that scenario, though, and it breaks my heart to think of him pushed aside. But as much as I am a Biggio fan, as much as I am a fan of any individual player, I am a bigger Toronto Blue Jays team fan. And ultimately, I want what is going to help them win more games on the field.
Right. So with that being said, then, Steve, let me ask you this. We know the third base situation right now needs to be addressed. However, is it as important as addressing the starting rotation?
I would say that the starting rotation would be more important at this point, because why does Joe Panic still get no love? What does Joe Panic need to do in Toronto? Okay, is he a star? Is he an all-star third baseman? No. He can field the position. He gets key hits. Doesn't get a lot of hits, but when he gets hits, they seem to be in key situations. Have Panic, ease him in with Biggio at third. Okay, it's too late now. I mean, we're talking about this, and it should have been already addressed. Okay, I don't want to keep beating that dead horse, but it should already be addressed. So now we're going to have to play catch up. And I'm sorry, 7-9 in April means the same as 7-9 in July and 7-9 in September. It doesn't matter when you go 7-9. At some point, it affects your ability to make the playoffs. So you would think you would need to go and do something now, but we know that it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen till the end of Ross Atkins' 5-year contract, probably.
Steve. In fairness, I've spoken to Mark Shapiro multiple times, not recently, because their whole media thing has changed, and oh man, you can't talk to anybody. But anyway, that's a whole other issue. I'm not going to get into that. But this idea of you need 50 or 60 games before you really know what you have here, right? So in that context, Steve, I think 7-9 in April actually doesn't mean as much as it would in July heading into a trade deadline, or in mid to late September. I don't think, and I get what you're saying as far as numbers and win totals, but right now things are still getting worked out, right? So it's frustrating and all of that, but I wonder though if what we're seeing and the problems and the frustration that I'm feeling and the desire to throat punch people who make poor decisions with regard to this team, if it's just that, it's just a 2-week span that, will get itself sorted out, or is this the real deal? Karen?
I mean, I think my thoughts on that. They're not a finished product. This is open auditions. They are still sorting out the bugs. They're figuring out what is going to work long term and what ultimately they'll have to make a different personnel decision. We were just talking right now about third base and then starting pitching. And I know there were all kinds of rumors in the offseason. Right here, right now, what would the Jays give up to get a package of Chris Bryant and Kyle Hendricks?
Cavan Biggio would have to be one of those pieces, I think. And that hurts me to say.
He's a perfect Cub. And I was thinking that when you said that, but I mean, since I'm already Mr. Sunshine, I didn't want to continue to rain on the parade. But that's the first thing I thought. The Cubs are going to ask for Cavan Biggio.
Biggio, Rourke, which one of those two I'm okay with. Let's be real. But maybe even, Joe Panic. Steve, we're going to get you in on the negotiations with the Cubs, and you can sell Panic to them. Because you're not selling him to me, but...
Well, the thing is, though, is that if I was in the negotiations, I would actually use the phone. I would pick up the phone. I'd answer the phone. I'd tell my secretary, look, I don't care if I'm in a meeting. If this guy calls, do that. Rather, then I'm really not sure really what Ross does. He grew a beard in the offseason, which I guess is something.
Yeah.
Brad Pitt and Moneyball. Phone.
Yes.
Exactly.
Exactly. I think it would take a Biggio. It would take a pitcher of some sort. And I don't know that the Cubs are looking for somebody who's going to help them right now. Tanner Rourke. Yeah, Tanner Rourke has no value to anybody. Except his loved ones, of course. But it's got to be Biggio, and that's the part that's going to sting, right? You're not going to get a Chris Bryant alone, let alone with Kyle Hendricks, without giving up something that hurts in one way or another. I would offer Biggio, Rowdy Tellez, and just one pitching prospect. That one of their better ones, and I would be okay with that. Sorry.
Kleffenstein, maybe?
Yeah, something like that, I don't know that would be enough to get it done, but that's where I would start.
1 year of Chris Bryant,
yeah, but the Kyle Hendricks is the real
I know.
target there, right? So, yeah. Anyway, it's fun to speculate. It's fun to get into trade talks and what ifs. All I know is right now the Blue Jays are not playing up to their capabilities. And if anything, I think maybe Karen's sunny view of things may be shining through here because they're not playing up to their capabilities, which means we know they can be better. So maybe sunny days ahead. Maybe. We'll see. Remains to be seen. I don't know about that because they're coming up against the Boston Red Sox, the American League East leading Boston Red Sox, and, of course, the Tampa Bay Rays. So, with that in mind, we're come to the end of yet another episode of the Jays from the Couch podcast. Thank you both for tuning in. Yeah, I suppose you tuned in, I suppose. But for joining me this week, Karen, let everybody know how they can follow you and all that stuff.
Yes, when Twitter works, which is once in a while, I'm on Twitter at Karen Sutar1. That's SOUTAR1. Well, either that or I'm in Toronto and my cell phone is through Rogers and I haven't been able to get into my cell phone all day. So, but anyway, yeah, when I'm able to access Twitter for one reason or another, I'm on there quite often and I love to talk baseball or anything respectfully, and yep, I'm around.
And hosting Sunny Side of the Dome Thursdays at 6 p.m. Eastern time. And if you like what you heard from Karen this week, you're going to love her show because it's all her. She doesn't have Steve and I anchoring her to our negativity.
Dragging her down.
That's right. So make sure you catch that Thursdays 6 p.m. Eastern time. Steve, how about yourself?
You can generally hear me yelling probably as far as Nova Scotia from my home in Pittsburgh. But in case you try to go through social media, it's at USFJs on Twitter. There is a more active USFJs Facebook page. I've been doing recorded videos of sort of like a daily video diary of the 2021 Toronto Blue Jays season. So please check that out. And the On Feck Circle, Tuesdays, 6 p.m. Eastern time. If you think I was angry today, make sure you tune in tomorrow.
I can't wait. All right. So for all of our viewers and listeners, thank you for tuning in for another week of Blue Jays Talk. We really appreciate it. Make sure you check out jaysfromthecouch.com. Follow us on Twitter at jaysfromcouch. We're on Facebook, Instagram, everywhere. And the audio version of this podcast can be found on Apple, Google, Spotify, everywhere. So for Karen, for Steve, for Cavan Biggio, this is Sean Doyle. You can follow me on Twitter at Doyle JFtC. Hoping life gives you a juicy fastball down the middle and you don't miss it. Take care.